Today's podcast is brought to you by Sprizzy. Looking to skyrocket your YouTube channel's growth? Meet Sprizzy, your video's ultimate matchmaker. Their tailored ad campaigns connect your content with viewers who are already looking for videos like yours. With Sprizzy, you're not just getting views, you're gaining subscribers who are genuinely interested in what you create. Are you ready to boost your reach? Visit Sprizzy.com today and let's launch your channel to new heights. Sprizzy, the smarter way to promote your YouTube channel. Jim, you used to call me Jim. Jim. What would God need with a starship? Well, if you want to do another Trek film, Eric, the next film is the worst one, but it's fun.
I'm saving myself for annihilation. Okay. That's the next.
Look, if you fail this movie, I'll be upset.
Oh no, it's not a failure.
Okay, thank you. All right. I was gonna say, I was like, man,
I
have my
reasons, dude. I have my reasons, and part of that is since because of how you told me to watch it.
All right, I feel like this is all my fault now. Eric's disdain for this movie is my fault.
Okay, disdain is strong. Disdain is strong.
Anton, all right, we're gonna start we are recording, and I'll probably leave this in. Anton, I told Eric, if you're going to watch Star Trek 4, you need to watch 2 and 3 first, because it is like one long movie.
Yeah, it's so true. You get a full arc, and then you got a nice bow at the end. I think that's very fair.
And I don't disagree with that.
Okay, all right, okay. Well, this is Why Wasn't It Better, and I am your host, Patrick Darms.
I'm your co-host, Anton Paras.
And we have a very familiar guest with us. Not just any guest, our producer, Eric Taylor. Eric, welcome back.
Boys, always a pleasure. The pleasure's all mine. Love talking about movies.
The pleasure is ours, Eric. Please. We're so excited to have you, as always.
You just let me on because I make all your shorts for you. Be honest.
Well, Eric, we're super excited to have you on.
Excited.
You've been on a bit of a Star Trek binge, right?
I have, and as previously discussed, it's all Patrick's fault.
It's all my fault.
Do you have a favorite character so far?
Every time I hear his voice, I laugh. Well, it's George Takei.
Okay.
He's awesome.
Mr. Sulu.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah. Oh, I got real choked up at when you hear his voice like quiver at Spock's funeral, when he's like, "Oh, that cut me deep." Like,
Space funeral.
He says like present arms or something like that. It happened when
phenomenal.
Oh my god, dude. Yeah. Let's talk about
Spock's funeral got to you.
Oh yeah. But I'm a total bitch. I cry at everything. I am always tearing up at the stupidest shit. Like Hallmark movies. I know how they end. I know what happens. They all have the same plot. Still, for some reason, by the end of it, I always tell Caitlin all the time, like Klaus. Have you seen that movie? The Netflix movie
on Netflix. It's a fun one.
Yeah, love it. Oh, it's super fun until the end. And then I'm Niagara Falls, okay? And I don't enjoy that. I like movies where, like we were talking about Annihilation. There's no point in Annihilation where I cry. But it's a good movie, you know what I mean? Like, you don't have to make me upset for it to be a good movie.
Did you like Kirk's eulogy?
Oh, yeah. Oh, that got me, too.
Yeah.
When he was the most human. Ugh.
That's what I will always cite when anyone tries to tell you that, Shatner's a bad actor. I'm like, I don't think so. I disagree with that.
Dude, I think he's fantastic.
The most human.
The acting across the board in these movies is spectacular.
You weren't affected by the death of his son?
No.
That was
in the
Search for Spock.
That was in the Search for Spock.
Yeah, no.
Okay. No. What about the plight of George and Gracie?
George and Gracie.
They are the two whales in this film. Sorry, I can't even say that with a straight face. It's pretty serious stuff, though.
Is it? It seems like a fucking joke. I'm sorry.
I don't think it is.
Dude, it's like, up. Here comes aliens, and for some reason, they got to talk to whales. And then also, are they supposed to repopulate? Like,
yes.
Are they going to manufacture some genetic diversity there?
Yes, they can clone them now that they have real ones.
Are whales communicating with outer space? Or
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
The answer is yes.
Yes. I love this plot. I think it's completely original. You have to give it points for that, Eric. It is completely
Well,
original.
the what is it? The tones to communicate with aliens. It's very close encounters, right?
Yeah.
But okay, this is what was unclear, and maybe I missed it. Do the whales have it, like, I guess in present day, right? And also, is it specifically just the humpback whales?
No.
Do they have a society? If they're communicating with outer space, do they have technology? Is there
No.
like
No. They don't.
No, they're just whales.
Citizens.
yes. I get that. So
They don't delve into it too much.
that's what I'm saying. I'm like, did I miss something?
No.
Or
You didn't. You didn't.
Nope. They're just whales.
They don't go into any details.
And,
Except
like, usually I like that. Usually I like when things are left a bit mysterious. I
if
know
you
you
read the
said
novelization, it goes into a bit more.
maybe if the answer is satisfying, I'd have a better feeling about this movie.
I have a feeling the answer will not satisfy you, but we
I'm
can
fucking
discuss
sure
it.
of it. Absolutely sure of it.
Well, Pat, warp speed.
Yes, let's go. The film that we are discussing today is Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home. The key to saving the future can only be found in the past. Only the technology of the future can save what's endangering the past. Stardate 1986. Living in exile on the planet Vulcan, the ragtag former crew of the Starship Enterprise steal a starship after receiving a planetary distress call from Earth. Well, they had already stolen it because it was the Vulcan bird of prey, but whatever. A space probe has entered into orbit around Earth, disabled global power on the planet, and evaporated the oceans. I got to stop pulling these summaries off Google because this is not completely accurate, but I'm just going to plow ahead. Captain Kirk, Spock, and the rest of the officers travel back in time to retrieve now extinct humpback whales, which Spock has deduced will communicate with the probe and send it away from Earth. The film was released on November 26, 1986 by Paramount Pictures, directed by Leonard Nimoy, screenplay by Steve Mearson, Peter Krikes, Nicholas Meyer, and Harve Bennett, starring William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, DeForest Kelley, James Doohan, George Takei, Walter Koenig, Nichelle Nichols, and Catherine Hicks. The budget was $25 million, that is $72 million adjusted for inflation. The box office was $133 million, that is $370 million adjusted for inflation. So everyone, crack open a fresh Michelob and enjoy as we discuss Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home. Eric, they say the sea is cold, but the sea contains the hottest blood of all. Why did you want to talk about Star Trek IV?
Well, so this might seem like blasphemy, but I would consider myself I've always liked Star Trek more than Star Wars. I've always stood by Star Wars as a fantasy in space.
Hold on.
And
I'm just going to stop you right there. That is the correct opinion.
oh, okay. Well, I'm
Good.
sure there are other people who may take offense, but it was the sort of thing where I never get really into these things. Like when I grew up with them, it was sort of like a way for my dad and I to bond. So we would always watch Star Trek: The Next Generation with Patrick Stewart and Jean-Luc Picard, Q. So I just have such fond memories of that series. And I had never seen any of the William Shatner stuff. I still haven't seen Star Trek 1. I've seen the remake, the like reimagining of it, and I really like those, and I appreciate them more now after seeing the movies and seeing where the new series sort of branched off and diverged from it. But I felt like I couldn't really call myself a Trekkie if I didn't watch some of the Shatner stuff, with Leonard Nimoy and everyone. So that's why I was interested in this.
Eric, I love the reasoning behind this. Yeah, I was curious about that because you had told me you were a Trek fan, and then you had mentioned that you hadn't seen any of these original films. I'm with you on Next Generation. That's one of my all-time favorite shows, as is Deep Space Nine. It's some of the best television ever made. I came to Trek later in life. I had seen the original series and this original run of films with my dad. But this was always one of the films that I liked as a kid because I think unlike some of the other films, this is I don't think it's a hot take to say this. This is the most family friendly of the Star Trek films. And it's a very popular film. And that's why I wanted to invite you to this episode, Eric, is because I was like, well, if he's never seen the original set of films, this will give you a good excuse to watch 3 in a row, because this is the third part of what is unofficially known as the Genesis Trilogy that begins with Wrath of Khan. The middle film is Search for Spock, and then it's concluded here, which is what you did to prepare for this. And yet there is a section of the fan base that doesn't like this film, even though it is quite popular. Anton, where do you stand on Star Trek in this film?
Well, I've mentioned it before, big Star Trek fan. And one of the first takeaways rewatching this film is it feels like I'm visiting an episode of the series. And being a big Star Trek fan, that is such a treat. Because knowing the original series, even the Next Generation, you don't get a lot of action in, a lot of these episodes. But you do get a lot of character development and heart. So I feel like as we start to take a look at this film, it's because of those kind of key things and questions about tone that really have us wondering what was the perception of the people watching this film about whales, space, and human interaction.
I'm glad you pointed that out, Anton, because I had the same thoughts. This is really is like an extended episode of the original series in a good way, whereas the motion picture, I think a lot of people would feel quite the opposite about that, where it feels like an extended, very expensive episode of the original series, but in a much more boring way. Eric, just wait till you watch the motion picture.
The motion picture? What do you mean?
The first Star Trek movie. It's called Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
Yeah.
Okay. Not Star Trek 1.
No, it's called Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
Okay.
That's how you can tell it apart from Star Trek 2009.
Is there motion in it? Is that
there's some
part of the story that they move?
Yeah, enough of it.
It has an overture to start the film.
Just before we move on, it's interesting that you say that, because part of the reason I did not like this movie as much is because it felt like an episode. Because I was here to see a movie. You know what I mean? And when I see a movie, I want it bigger, I just wanted Wrath of Khan again. But, I wanted...
I get it. I get it.
A lot of people...
I guess I'll save it for when we get into the plot. But I remember a Next Generation episode where they go back in time, but they go back to, the 1700s. And,
yes.
Or, the Wild West. And Data is there, and it's just, I recall that with such, I don't know, probably just nostalgia, let's be honest. But this didn't hit the same for me, and we'll probably need to get into the plot a little bit for why.
What I will address about that now is this. What I like about this film is that familiar territory where is the crew of the Enterprise are confronted with a problem and they have to solve it. And that is what a lot of what the TV episodes revolved around. Now, to your point, it's subjective. If it's not what you want out of a movie, it won't deliver for you. But let's do the production history for this, Anton.
Make it so. Even before the release of The Search for Spock in June 1984, Leonard Nimoy was asked to return to direct the next film in the franchise. He agreed, as Paramount agreed to not only give him more artistic control, but a bigger budget as well. Nimoy recalled, quote, Paramount said flat out that they wanted my vision, end quote. He added that his vision was for, quote, no dying, no fighting, no shooting, no photon torpedoes, no phaser blasts, no stereotypical bad guy. I wanted people to really have a great time watching this film, and if somewhere in the mix we lobbed a couple of big ideas at them, well, then that would be even better, end quote. Wanting to make something thematically different from the drama of that film, Nimoy and producer Harve Bennett conceived a story with an environmental message and no clear-cut villain. Initially, William Shatner wasn't willing to return, so Nimoy and Bennett spent months considering a prequel about the main characters at Starfleet Academy. Eventually, Shatner was given a pay raise and agreed to return. What can we say? Burgers were getting expensive. Nimoy and Shatner each received $2.5 million for the film. The cast's rising salaries caused Paramount to create a new television series, Star Trek: The Next Generation, with less expensive, lesser-known actors. It debuted the following year. Nimoy and Bennett selected a time travel story in which the Enterprise crew encounters a problem that could only be fixed by something only available in the present day, the Star Trek character's past. Nimoy read a book on extinct animals and conceived the storyline that was eventually adopted. The idea to use humpback whales came from a friend of Nimoy's. Now, Nimoy asked Beverly Hills Cop writer Daniel Petrie Jr. to write the screenplay when a concept that executive producer Jeffrey Katzenberg, yes, him, described as, quote, either the best or worst idea in the world, end quote, arose. Star Trek fan Eddie Murphy wanted a starring role. Nimoy and Murphy acknowledged his part would attract non-Star Trek fans to the franchise following the rising popularity of Murphy, but it also meant the film might be ridiculed. Steve Mearson and Peter Krikes were hired to write a script with Murphy as a college professor who believes in aliens and likes to play whale songs. Murphy ended up disliking the part and decided to make the Golden Child instead. The character intended for Murphy was rewritten into Dr. Gillian Taylor.
Sidebar, I think this worked out well for everyone because I really like the Golden Child.
Yeah, I think that as much as I would have loved to see Eddie Murphy in Starfleet, it worked out.
It'd be a very different movie.
Would you like to take the rest, Pat?
Yes, I would. So Paramount still disliked the screenplay, and they asked Nicholas Meyer, the writer and director of Eric's favorite movie, Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, to help rewrite it. He and Bennett split the task of conceiving the plot between them. Bennett wrote the first quarter of the story up to the point where the crew goes back in time. Meyer wrote the story's middle portion taking place on 20th century Earth, and Bennett handled the ending. After 12 days of writing, Meyer and Bennett combined their separate portions. They cut out Krikes and Mearson's idea of having the Klingon bird of prey appear over the Super Bowl halftime show and the hint that Saavik remained on Vulcan because she was pregnant with Spock's child. Meyer and Bennett expected to receive the only writing credits, but Krikes and Mearson filed for arbitration with the Writers Guild. They were awarded credit as well, a decision that left Meyer bitter, and he is very bitter in the making of features that are on the Blu-ray. Principal photography began in February 1986. It was the first film in the series to extensively film on location. Much of it was filmed in and around San Francisco over a period of 10 days. In the film, the bird of prey lands cloaked in Golden Gate Park. Heavy rains prevented them from actually filming in the location. It must have been the only week of the year it rained in San Francisco. Will Rogers Park in western Los Angeles was used instead. Much of the Cetacean Institute was created using the real-life Monterey Bay Aquarium. The scene in which Uhura and Chekhov questioned passers-by on the street about the location of nuclear vessels was filmed with a hidden camera. However, the people with whom Koenig and Nichols speak were extras hired off the street for that day's shooting, and despite legends to the contrary, they knew they were being filmed. Industrial Light and Magic provided all of the visual effects. The bird of prey's travel through time was one of the more difficult sequences of the film using very early CGI. There's also a making of video on that you can find on YouTube. Most of the close-up shots of the whales were large-sized animatronics. It was Bennett's suggestion that Paramount studio heads asked Nimoy to create subtitles for the probe's transmission at the start of the film and for the climax with the whales. But both Nimoy and Meyer strongly opposed this and eventually won out. James Horner, who composed the scores for Wrath of Khan and Search for Spock, declined to return for this one. Nimoy's friend Leonard Rosenman was hired as a replacement. The Voyage Home was the first Star Trek film shown in the Soviet Union, screened by the World Wildlife Fund on June 26, 1987 in Moscow to celebrate a ban on whaling. And this stands at an 82% Rotten Tomatoes score. And that is the production history for Star Trek IV. It's time to talk why wasn't it better? I know Eric has a heck of a lot to say about this. We can start with the tone of this film, because that's probably the biggest point that you could make about this film. This is the most comedic of the Star Trek films. It is not the easiest film to assess, in my opinion, because if you want to go back to Nimoy's original vision, I always think about this when I'm watching this film. quote, no dying, no fighting, no shooting, no photon torpedoes, no phaser blasts, no stereotypical bad guy. I wanted people to really have a great time watching this film, and if somewhere in the mix we lobbed a couple of big ideas at them, well, then that would be even better, end quote.
All I hear is no shooting, no dying, no weapons, no fun.
I think that is so ambitious, and it's
listen,
a fun. I think that's a fun writing exercise. And if you put so many constraints like that, you kind of think, how many different ways can we take a story? And I love that in this direction, Nimoy was like, let's have the crew have fun and make this a bit more lighter. And I still felt entertained throughout watching that, despite no action. I know that that's not for everyone, but
I think another part of the problem is, and again, this is all Patrick's fault, is because I was thinking about it as though it were a trilogy, right?
Mhm.
So, like, the last movie in a trilogy might not be the best movie in the trilogy, but big things happen. So I was expecting, like, I don't even know, something which I guess some weird probe coming and, I don't know, boiling the oceans and knocking everyone's communication out. I guess that's a big thing, but it's never explained. It's not a real conflict. And again, I don't need a bad guy. I don't need a stereotypical bad guy. I agree with that. But it just wasn't, I just, it's hard to put into words, like, what I'm trying to say. But
was it not entertaining? It made, putting
it
that
made
out
me
there?
it made me laugh, but I don't know.
Did it not feel compelling, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, probably. Also, I'm like, okay, so here is one of the best sci-fi, franchises out there, and you go to 1987. Like, that's old new. Like, that's not what I want to see. I would love to see it in an episode. That's cool, but I want to see space battles. It's a fucking sci-fi movie. I want to see stuff like that happen. I want to see sci-fi stuff happen. And, like, yeah, I guess time travel is, science fiction and all that. But, if the whole movie, I would rather effects be used for sci-fi stuff than for animatronic whales.
All I'll say is this: if it was up to the writers for The Next Generation, you'd get a lot more episodes on the holodeck with maybe Jean-Luc Picard as a detective. So, and no photon torpedoes or no typical sci-fi either.
I get too that that's not what Star Trek is about. It's not about those things. But
Right.
maybe in a movie it can be. That's what I'm saying. Like, the movies that are supposed to be bigger, broader than the episodes, and I felt like this was very specific, and it didn't feel like universe or even galaxy spanning. There weren't any of those kinds of ramifications.
They did save the whole world.
Yeah, but there's plenty of those now.
See, I wonder if you might feel differently about this film if you had watched the rest of them, because I love how different this is than the rest of the films. That's one of the reasons why I love this film so much.
I mean, my problem is too, I just love Wrath of Khan.
It's fair.
And that was serious, and that was tight writing. There were still moments of levity. You know what I mean? It was just all around a very good movie. This sort of, I don't want to say it felt like a joke. And again, hearing about what Leonard Nimoy was trying to do, I think that's great. I think that's cool. Do it in like a 2-part episode on TV. Like, I would be so upset if I paid money to sit in a movie theater and I watched this. That's kind of where I'm at.
I think if the TV show was around then, they would have, but it just didn't exist.
I think.
See that I don't even.
I was going to say, I think part of the context, or at least I would say this is kind of the frame that I would recommend thinking about here, Eric, is before you have this film, a majority of the setting that we have for the Star Trek crew is in space, it's on another planet, it's within this very familiar setting. So for all intents and purposes, this is so novel and this is so different for the series, and in doing so, putting it within the fashion and the setting of a film.
So
and I
then
have to say, like, kind of the technical execution of that too, a very pretty looking film at that. So yeah.
So then do it as number 5. Don't connect it to the Search for Spock, because it's like Wrath of Khan, Search for Spock, whales, and like it just sort of like, again, this is really all Pat's fault, but it just ended in a way that I was like, that's it.
Well,
I see. Okay, I can see what you're saying.
maybe I shouldn't have introduced it to you as a trilogy. I
No, and I'm
did.
joking.
I think I did tell you though. It's an unofficial trilogy.
Right. The beginning is connected to the Search for Spock.
Well, the only reason I told you to watch the other two before this is there is stuff that happens in this film. You're like, what are they talking about?
And maybe if I didn't see the previous two films, maybe I would have liked this one better. I don't know. I just, when you put it up against those two, and I don't know if I said it on recording, but like the Wrath of Khan is amazing. And the Search for Spock, I was thinking of it as a sequel in a trilogy. Typically not the best of the films, but I thought it was a solid film. And then this just was such a deviation that I was almost confused as to what was happening. And I was sitting there and I was like, oh, I hope we don't stay in 1987 very long. And we stayed in 1987 for the whole movie.
They did, yes. So would you give Wrath of Khan like an A?
Oh hell yeah! I would push it up to like, I would give it an A+. I was so like taken aback by how well written like that movie was, and I didn't think for a second that it felt dated because of the effects or anything. Yeah, they're dated, but I still think it didn't rely on those effects, to make it a good science fiction movie. It's just a good movie all the way around. I feel I want it certainly up there on my best movies I've seen, for sure, hands down. Wrath of Khan.
But you said you did laugh at this film.
I did. I thought some of it was funny. I thought that, especially because of the cultural context, that'd be like, where do you have your nuclear missiles? Where, excuse me, sir, like random people in the street. And it's so interesting. I thought that was interesting for two reasons. One, because of the world of Star Trek and the future is so unlike even where it is now. Right? Like, you'd be put on a list if you were just walking around to random people and being like, where do you have your nuclear missiles? People would probably think you're insane. But, for them, there's no conflict. There's nothing weird about them just asking this. You know what I mean? Like, can you, an everyday person, you must know where these things are. Could you direct me, please? Like, I thought it was funny. And they started bringing some of the campiness and that funniness into Search for Spock too, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yes.
It was a little bit more lighthearted. And like, that's the thing, is that like it started off like very serious and then slowly got more and more lighthearted. And I'm not sure how I felt about that, as like, if you look at it as like one story. And maybe I'm just basic and I wanted the stakes to continuously be raised. You know what I mean? But yeah.
My favorite bit about that is when they discover, they're like, oh yeah, they still use money here, and he pawns the spectacles. And he's like, I'll give you $100. He's like, is that a lot?
Yeah. Because I don't even think they really have money.
They don't use money in the future.
No, there's not even like credits or some galactic economy bullshit. It's just like, but that's the thing. That's what's so compelling about
Did you
Star
like
Trek.
Scotty and McCoy as the double act?
Yeah. I like that.
Hello, computer.
Did you like when Spock took out the punk rocker on the bus?
Yes. The guys, I liked.
We're just trying to find things you liked here.
I liked the humor.
Okay. So it made you laugh, and you think it was successful as a comedy.
It made me
Or
chuckle.
what about
I
those real
never.
whales in the film?
Okay, and the scene where it's like, oh, we got a tank for these whales on the ship. And it's just so clearly, it's just a green screen of two whales in the ocean.
Yep.
But like, I mean,
Animatronic whales, by the way.
yeah. I heard that, and
Good
my response
animatronics.
was, I would rather have them put that money into sci-fi shit, not whales. The thing of it
Eric,
is, it
there's
would be.
different kinds of sci-fi. Like, this is sci-fi.
Damn.
I concur. You're right. It is sci-fi, but it's not what I wanted to see out of my sci-fi movie. I mean, you know, and time travel's so messy, dude.
It's
Time
very
travel's
messy.
so messy, and when you do it, you either have to say this has happened in every single timeline, or they categorically changed something in the past, which would, to me, would mean when they swung back around the sun or what the fuck ever to like go forward in time, which I'm not going to touch on that, but like, then how could they even be positive that the timeline they were coming back to is the exact same? Unless they always go back in time and they always have taken those whales, and this is all a part of history already. Like, time
Paradox.
stuff, yeah, time stuff is messy, and if you're not prepared to really like delve into like time as a construct, then it sort of seems like something that was willy-nilly. They did it just so I get what you're saying, that it was a departure, that it was different, that it was something new. But when I look at the three films that are connected to one another as a whole, I still think this is the weakest one, regardless of.
I know what you mean. I personally think Search for Spock is the weakest because it's so closely tied to Wrath of Khan. It's a companion piece to Wrath of Khan, where this could be watched as a standalone film if you wanted to.
Yeah, I'd argue that this film allows its characters to explore, be themselves, and develop as characters, and especially that for like a Spock character that's still kind of becoming himself compared to Search of Spock. So
Wasn't there a TV show?
Oh, he's so funny in this. They didn't have a TV show, Eric.
Well,
Nope.
I'm confused. So the motion picture was the first Star Trek piece of media.
No.
it was the first movie.
The original series was on in the 60s, and then
Okay.
it got canceled.
Okay.
And it did so well on syndication, on reruns, that they were going to make a second show.
Mhm.
But they ended up, because of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Paramount was like, wait a minute, slow, boring science fiction movies can be successful. Let's just make a movie instead. That's how you got the motion picture, which came out in 1979.
Okay. See, I don't know this context, but
Right.
still, you're talking about character development and stuff like that. But so we've been through three movies before this movie. You're saying there wasn't?
Three movies.
Yeah. So for three movies, there wasn't, like, I thought the characters developed between the Search for Spock, between Wrath of Khan and Search for Spock. I mean, and some of it felt a little bit more shoehorned in than others, i.e. his son dying.
Right.
But, it's development. It is funny seeing Spock be sort of like goofy and like not really know what's going on because he's getting all his memories back. True, but I don't know. I think it's just because I was thinking about it as a trilogy, and like, it's, when you look at it like that, I still don't think this is very strong. But
Well, no, I just completely regret doing this.
I don't
to
know.
you.
I feel like
I'm just making you feel bad. Pat.
I think it's a great as a trilogy in the sense that everything gets flipped on its head in Wrath of Khan, and you don't get kind of back to basics until the end of this film, and like it literally resets. And I feel like that was very satisfying as a Star Trek fan.
Oh yeah, yeah, and the characterization of the crew. I think if I had to pick one thing about this film that's like, what's my favorite thing about it? It's their chemistry. It's all of their banter. It's seeing them, pair off, where you get the double act of McCoy and Scotty. You have Kirk and Spock, and they end up meeting, what's her name, Dr. Catherine Hicks, or is that the actress's name? No, sorry, whatever. What's her name? Jill Taylor? Is that it? I
can
have it
call
written
her
down, but
Kathy
I didn't
Hicks.
scroll down, so whatever. Anyway, they're interacting with her, and then Chekhov and Uhura are doing their thing. It's pretty unique for that. And that's what I like about it. They're all fish out of water. I appreciate that part of it. And this is just peak Shatner.
Again, it was entertaining, but like, I guess my question is, so you didn't feel like at all that their characterization in this movie wasn't kind of different from their characterization in the previous ones? Because the previous ones were more serious, and therefore I felt they were more serious. And then they come in here and they're joking goofy.
But they don't know that they're joking.
I understand that, but you don't think that portrayal of them being goofy kind of wasn't?
No, I like this is everything I want out of a sequel because they completely do something different.
Mhm.
That's what I want out of most sequels, Eric. And Anton and I talk about this a lot. We're like, one of the things I don't like about Eric, well, you were on when we talked about Temple of Doom, and like one of the things I liked about that most is how different it was from Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is not for everyone. But I am so grateful for this Trek film because they going back to Nimoy's original vision, and of course it's subjective, right? It is not for everyone, but I love what he was trying to do. Is he set out to do something completely different than the previous two films, and he did it.
I would have liked it more if he didn't tie it in to the previous two films.
I want to go back to my original point. Like, it's very ambitious to have a very strong artistic vision and stick to a non-conventional story like this as part of like that trilogy. And Eric, I can totally see why it's a bit jarring, but I have to completely agree with Pat. We didn't take that same formula of let's have a big bad villain and prop that up against the crew that they have to take down and then complete the cycle. And I think it was, again, very refreshing and fun. And in a way, I mean, very impressive to see how they can kind of end the trilogy or complete the story despite not having that same conventional storytelling that they had with the previous films. And at the same time, still having all of the heart and all of what makes Star Trek so enjoyable for fans of the series still be in the fiber of and core of the film.
They also kind of hamstrung themselves with the ending of Search for Spock, where they blow up the Enterprise and they basically commit.
They're getting court-martialed.
Right. So it kind of they successfully resurrect Spock and save him, right? And because of the way that film ended, and Eric, I'm going to go back to my previous point where they didn't really plan what the next film was going to be, which seems incredulous now because every series these days has a shared universe or an expanded or cinematic universe, whatever you want to call it. They weren't doing that back then. So they had two choices with this film. Either they could pick up where Search for Spock left off and try to resolve some of those plot points, which they did, or they could completely ignore it and do some kind of reset again, which they chose not to do.
I mean, I disagree. I think, but I mean, I haven't seen all the movies. I just know eventually we become cool with the Klingons at some point because of Commander Worf, right? So I would have preferred. Okay, hold on.
That's like 100 years after this, though.
Right, but I don't know that. I'm just saying you could do something that still effectively ties into everything else without being like alien probe trying to talk to whales, and you could do all that if it wasn't directly tied into, because the endings do flow into one another. And I don't know enough, I guess, about the original series. Again, I know more about the Next Generation on, which I know is fine. It's several hundred years, but there are things that can be in space that do not require an antagonist. Right? Space in of itself is just a dangerous place. And again, I do appreciate what Leonard Nimoy was trying to do. I just really, it is laid out like a trilogy. I don't think you were incorrect in telling me that, Pat, because they all tie into what you can't really watch one without the other, because if you don't watch The Search for Spock, you don't know why Spock's acting so weird, right?
No, it would make no sense.
It would make no sense. But I just felt the tone was like way off from the other two movies. And, you know, I was expecting something bigger because, you know, we always talk about it, but like Lord of the Rings, the end of that trilogy is pretty fucking big, right? Big things happen. It's crazy. Imagine if Lord of the Rings ended and it was just like a buddy comedy, like two dudes, you know?
Yeah, I mean,
roam in the countryside, fish out of water story. I don't know. I don't think it's a bad movie. I just, in the context of Wrath of Khan being a part of this overarching story, I just think it pales in comparison. I really do. Again, you know.
what'd you think of the acting?
It was great. The acting was great. Like, the humor was great. I don't even think the story's that bad. I think it's a little weird. I think part of it too, I kept thinking of this. Did you guys ever watch Drunk History? There's the Drunk History where they talk about the dolphin experiments where
Very
like
different
they were
experience with cetaceans.
right. Oh, is it? Are you? But
If
also
it's the same one I'm thinking of.
Yeah, but like, yeah, they like fall in love with the dolphins and do acid with the dolphins, and like, I don't know why I kept thinking about that while I was watching this.
What's the line that he says where she's like, "What's the deal with your friend?" And he's like, "Oh, he's harmless." Back in the 60s, he was part of the free speech movement at Berkeley. I think he did a little too much LDS.
Yes. And isn't that the Mormon church?
Yeah.
Isn't that the LDS?
Yep.
Okay.
Eric, did you think that you took LDS when they enter Time Warp and you see the CGI
Feels
renditions
like
of their faces just drifting up through the screen?
I think I was so traumatized by that I blacked it out. I'm gonna have to go back and watch it again.
It's one of the craziest things in a Trek movie.
I mean, I don't know. I didn't think the effects were terrible.
No, they hold up pretty well.
I was just like, oh, yep. Here's a bird of prey. It was a bird of prey, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
A bird of prey, which is a Klingon ship.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I guess they're familiar enough with the tech to A, fly it, and B, build a whale habitat in it.
Well, remember Sulu makes some comments about like, I'm not familiar with this craft, but I can fly anything.
Right. But still.
They work around it. They improvise.
I guess. I just remember it being like, oh, well, tank's done. We got all the...
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, look, they're all brilliant engineers. Like Scotty, he was like, I know exactly what I need for this tank to work. Transparent aluminum. It's one of my favorite bits. Where they're like, how do you know he didn't invent the thing?
That's the thing, dude. Like, I don't know. I felt like the other two movies before this, they didn't feel like comedies.
No,
this
is
very,
you
like,
could classify
sitcom.
this as a comedy.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Anton, we were talking about this offline. I was watching scenes from the motion picture to prepare for this because, you know, only 7 years before this film. They age horribly in the 7 years.
Yeah. You can tell they're putting on a lot of makeup in this film.
Yeah.
And let's just say Scotty's looking like he's filling more and more of the screen.
He put on probably 50 pounds.
Yeah. When they
Eric,
have
just wait. By the time we get to Undiscovered Country, he's portly.
And you watch these films and you realize why they were poking fun at him so much in Family Guy in the early seasons.
And what was it Futurama?
Yeah.
Remember the character Welshie?
Yeah, of course. Which that episode so great because they actually have the full cast for the most part, except for him.
Do you know why he didn't want to participate?
It was too insulting.
He hated Shatner that much. He was just like, I will not have anything to do with that man.
Wait, isn't it so great that Futurama had a full episode on how Star Trek almost ended civilization because of the fandom?
Yeah.
That's so, and so they had to get rid of all mention of Star Trek. So funny.
The Simpsons did stuff with that too. With Comic Book Guy, where he's like, this is the world's only working phaser. It was fired only once to keep William Shatner from making another album.
Rocket Man.
Oh man, Bones, so great.
Bones. So it's so entertaining again just to see their what makes their characters feel so alive and in these fresh environments was very entertaining. And also in my backyard, so that's always fun.
It's very of the era too. Like, Anton, this really reminds me of like the Roger Moore James Bonds.
Mm-hmm.
Same tone, right?
Yeah, and I think watching it as well, I saw it in HD, and it just looks really good too. Like, it's one of the benefits of seeing a big budget Star Trek film like this is you didn't get this right in the original series. In the 60s, very low budget. Some of the doors don't even close properly.
Right.
We're lucky we didn't get to see a lot of that in HD because it probably would be much less impressive. But here you see a lot of care and attention to a lot of the film, and it shows on the screen.
Yeah, I mean, this was the only one of the films to get an Academy Award nomination for cinematography, which I find interesting. The only one of the films that looks better than this is the motion picture, because it had a massive budget, which you could see on screen.
Massive budget, massive matte paintings.
It did. Yeah, Eric, I don't think you're going to like the motion picture because it's quite boring, but it is a incredible looking movie, especially for 79. They spent like the equivalent of $250 million in today's money on it.
Jeez.
It looks amazing, but
yeah, you won't like the costumes either.
No, space dentists.
No one liked those costumes.
McCoy showing up like he's fresh out of Studio 54. Yeah, I really like Mark Leonard in this. Anton shows up and tries to defend the Enterprise crew, and like he's like, I might die on this stupid planet. He plays Sarek, Eric.
Yeah,
Spock's father.
Yes.
Which also very cool turn of events, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did you recognize Catherine Hicks from any other film?
Because I'm a horror fan, yes.
Child's Play?
Yeah.
You've seen this, right, Eric?
What?
The original Child's Play?
No.
What? You've never seen the original Child's Play?
I feel like we do this every fucking episode that I'm on, where you name a movie, I say I haven't seen it, and you're like, "What? Really? You haven't seen it?" I'm like,
Chucky,
and
the original Chucky movie.
The original Chucky movie.
I'm cognizant.
Okay.
Of Chucky. I'm a simple man. I watch Annihilation once a year, the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
All right. Well, you're a man of taste. Well, she's the mom in Child's Play.
Okay. She was also on Seventh Heaven.
I also like to support small YouTubers when they do whole, like, I think Dr. Jordan Breeding did one recently of every single Child's Play movie. And I don't know. I like his humor. I try to support.
They don't make drama series like Seventh Heaven anymore. I'm fine with it.
Didn't they make a Chucky series, though?
They did.
Probably.
With Aubrey Plaza. Yeah.
With Aubrey Plaza. Well, there you go.
Pour one out for the CW.
Pour out a Michelob. The Voyage Home.
So the Voyage Home. Why is it called that?
Why is it called that? Well, they're on their way home.
Right. They were on their way home. And then...
Why is the search for Spock called the search for Spock?
Because they search for Spock.
Right. Okay. So...
But like, I don't know. They're on Earth. I don't know, man. This is not my favorite.
It's a quest, Eric. The main characters are faced with a problem, and they have to figure out how to solve it.
I think one other piece that we have to remember is this is a passion project for the environment.
Noble.
Yeah.
It's woke.
And I think like that's also what influenced this being in modern times at the time. So that way viewers can see it and say, oh, I need to take care of whales now.
Did this save whales?
I think they're okay.
I think they're doing okay, right?
Yeah, they're not. It's not the best, but I think like there's a lot of films out there that say you got to take care of them.
Well, Anton, you live near the Cetacean Institute in Sausalito, which is fictional.
It's not real.
It's not real, but the one in Monterey Bay is real.
Yes,
true.
That's
so
where,
you let us know.
That's where Finding Dory happens.
They
right?
don't have any. They do not have any humpback whales at.
I looked into this, and I should have known before I looked into it. You can't keep them in not custody because they're not under arrest, but you can't keep them in captivity.
They're not under arrest, Pat. They're just
that would be
detained.
impossible.
He's like, Admiral, I've deduced that we need to arrest the whales.
Stop counting that.
We're gonna need a very large pair of handcuffs. But I don't know, man. So yeah, it's like having a great white shark. You can't keep a great white shark in captivity. What makes you think you can keep a whale in captivity?
This
You can keep
film
whale sharks in
screenplay.
captivity
The hubris of Paramount.
because if it happens in movies.
Right. Wait,
I know.
Eric. So speaking of great white sharks in captivity, it's like, so are you trying to talk yourself into appearing on the Jaws 3 episode?
Not particularly.
You mean Jaws
because
3D?
I do, Anton. That's right. That's
Yeah,
right, Eric.
I
It's a
mean-
3D film.
Oh, I used to have a 3D TV too. Now I just have 4K.
I had the PlayStation 3D TV.
I had one too, Anton.
Um,
Wasn't worth it.
I'd be into it. As is covered often on my channel, I hate the ocean. I hate it. I don't want to be there. Don't want to be around it. Don't want to be in the middle of it. Don't want to fly over it.
You mentioned that
Want
several
nothing to
times
do
on
with
your
it.
BioShock walkthrough.
Yeah, but in the new video where I play Still Wakes the Deep, the title is Thalassophobia is a liberal lie to stop us from drilling for oil in the ocean.
Well,
Anyway, I don't like the water, so sure, I'll watch Jaws. Whatever.
well, you'd have to watch Jaws 3, unfortunately.
I
Is
have
that
to-
even worth covering? I don't know that it is. It's awful.
It's awful, and I don't.
We're doing
Did
Jaws
anyone-
2 next season.
Not only is it a bad film, but it also is a bad film that tried to piggyback on a fad, which is extra awful.
Jaws 2 is worth covering.
Yeah, but then I don't know. Avatar also went with the 3D glasses, and that turned out pretty good.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, it's way better than Jaws 3. It's a pretty low bar.
But then I'm trying to remember if other films then ended up trying to do 3D at the time. I think they did. There was a little bit of resurgence.
Clash of the Titans.
Yeah, that's right.
a lot of horror movies did it.
Yeah, it was
Final,
a thing.
Final
Oh,
Destination.
there was,
Bloody Valentine.
I was gonna say I'm pretty sure that WWE film with Kane as the main bad guy,
We're really sidebarring here.
Yeah.
See No Evil.
So, Voyage Home.
Which
Yeah, I mean, if you want to talk about the plot of it, it's pretty basic. The reason why I put it ahead of Search for Spock, I mentioned this before. You can watch this as a standalone film if you wanted to, whereas Search for Spock is much more of a challenge.
there is a much more context to bridge for that film for sure.
All right, Eric, this is where I'll go into this film a bit. The time travel stuff, it works for the plot of this film, but it does raise a lot of questions.
And they bring a woman back with them.
Seems very
That's the
irresponsible.
craziest part of the movie.
Well, don't they have the prime fucking directive, which is where, hey, we don't do shit like that.
Yes.
I understand it's for like other planets, but I mean at this point, past Earth is like another planet.
Eric,
Yeah.
which crew are we paying attention to? The one led by James Tiberius Kirk. The man does not listen to the prime directive at all.
So like, oh well, thanks for your help. We're not going to court martial you anymore. Who the fuck is this lady?
Well,
How does that conversation go?
yeah, the craziest thing is, like, doesn't she have a family in 1986?
I don't think she seems very lonely.
Oh,
Yeah, but
she
like-
was a lonely lady.
Imagine
She-
just abandoning your entire life like that.
What if you didn't have much of a life? I mean, it seemed like the whales were like literally her life.
She really liked them, George and Gracie. And I'd
Mhm.
appreciate if you just didn't refer to them as just the whales.
The whale.
They're characters, Eric.
I don't care what you want. I don't care.
Well, the question that I'm raising about the time travel stuff is like, why couldn't they just go back in time and stop Khan or save Kirk's son?
It's the problem when you bring time travel in,
Yeah,
because then
you're right.
you bring all that in, and that's the thing. I guess James Tiberius Kirk cared about his son about as much as I did, because I kind of thought he was annoying anyway. And so I guess he was like, yeah, I can go back in time, but like, good riddance.
Anton, I'm already thinking we need to have Eric back for Undiscovered Country because
Please, no.
Well,
don't
that's
do this
that.
to
I
me
will
again.
say, of course, I'd love to have Eric on, but all I'm gonna say now is spoiler alert: that is a low-hanging fruit, not great film.
what? Undiscovered Country?
Oh yeah,
I sense a dichotomy.
Wait,
between
you don't like that movie?
the hosts.
I don't love it
Interesting. It's probably my favorite Star Trek movie.
of all time.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah,
I'm going to be like a reality show producer right now.
Yeah,
And
I
be
think
like,
that's the one I watch the most. It's the one I'll watch that I'll put that above Wrath of Khan.
I watched Wrath of Khan, this one, and Undiscovered Country.
So you don't hate Undiscovered Country. Interesting.
But it's not my favorite.
This is interesting.
Well, it doesn't have to. All right, you know, I thought there was negativity happening there. So say if you want an amazing villain in Star Trek, Undiscovered Country has.
Again, the lack of villain is not my problem.
Well, if you want a good villain, Eric, that's the
Don't
film for you.
conflate.
But if you want a bad villain, we can have you for on Final Frontier. What would God lead with a starship? Movie's insane.
I don't know the reference.
It's not good. I don't know what I was going to say. Oh, Eric's favorite part of this film, the probe. Pretty intense.
I love the probe. Wish the whole movie was about that. Which I guess in a roundabout way it is, but just like, you know, not in 1987. That'd be great. That'd be cool. What's the novelization say about it, Pat?
Okay. I'm glad you asked. So I'm kind of grateful that the film doesn't do this, but the novelization, the context is interesting. It refers to the probe as the Traveler, and it can't contact the whales. Its intention is to wipe out all the life on Earth and just start over and reseed the planet. It doesn't have any way of communicating with anything except whales. And there is actually a novel that was written in the early 90s as a sequel to this film called Probe. It's an official Star Trek novel. It explained the origins of the probe. According to this novel, the probe was the lone survivor of an ancient civilization of whale-like life forms, and it could terraform planets to make them more suitable for cetacean life over humanoid life. So basically what this novel insinuates is that whales are related to the species of this probe thing. And they put them on, you know, they just basically colonized a bunch of different planets in a very different way that humans would colonize planets, which is they just live in the oceans. And the probe describes humans or humanoid life as quote unquote mites. And also, according to this novel, a lot of its core memories are missing due to it being damaged by what it refers to as, quote, mites in metal cubes, end quote. And if you know your Star Trek lore, it encountered the Borg, and the Borg wiped out its planet. So it gives a bit more context into the origins of this probe. Of course, none of this is hinted in the film at all, and none of it's ever really expanded in a movie or the Next Generation or Deep Space Nine or anything.
Which is fine, but it still doesn't really explain it. So, like, did they come to Earth and
looking for its fellow, like, just whales?
But it just so happens that this alien race
that has evolved from whales,
or whales evolved from this, or something. I don't know.
But like, even two different whale species have different calls.
Yes.
So like, it's kind of astronomical odds that the humpbacks would have the same exact, because they say specifically humpback whales. They don't just say we have to go back and get some whales. They say humpback whales.
Correct.
So you know how big the universe is, right? So like,
yeah, Eric, I'm not justifying it. I'm just like, this is the context that we have.
I understand that, but I don't know, man.
It's like, original. I'll give it points for that. It's original.
It's original, but it's not well thought out.
I don't know. It's not
because
bad.
Here's
what's the matter with it?
Here's what's original. So, have you? I think it's Stephen Baxter.
No.
Wrote a novel called Transcendent.
I don't know.
And in it, they're trying to collect this human knowledge. It takes place, I think, millions of years in the future. And they're all these humans, but they all look different because they've evolved. And there's a planet where they land and try to signal to whatever humans are still there. And the humans have actually devolved into whales. They live in the water. They are around there. That's interesting. I would like it more if it was like they were the species, they were marooned on this planet, and sort of kind of that's where whales come from. I know that's sort of not where whales come from, but you know, just like coincidentally, they can talk to humpbacks. You know, that's like me going to, you know, an uncontacted tribe in the Amazon, and coincidentally, they speak English.
Yeah, I mean,
I like that they didn't explain it in the actual movie.
That's why I
But,
like
like-
it. It doesn't have any explanation.
Right. But like, wasn't it boiling the oceans? Wasn't it evaporating the oceans? Wasn't
Yeah. I don't think they
They-
had the special effects to really show that.
no,
but yes.
and that's fine. I'm just like saying we brought these humpback whales through time around the sun in a spaceship and then dropped them in a boiling ocean.
Well, basically, what it was going to do is, since it couldn't establish contact with the whales, it was going to wipe out all the other
Right.
life on Earth.
That I get.
Yeah.
It's not.
I think boiling the
thing.
oceans is probably not the best way of describing it.
But if you were curious how they did boil those oceans or have those oceans on screen, they did use the Blue Sky tank, which you can book just by emailing Paramount Studios if you go on their website. I was actually just at Paramount Studios recently in December, and it is so cool to see their stage for like different scenes where they kind of have to film like big water scenes, and it's in their parking lot. Again, it's called the Blue Sky tank, and it fills about 900 gallons of water. And so when they were showing that scene, they actually showed the some clips from the Voyage Home where they had filmed.
Love it.
Always cool to be right on stage for the Paramount and the silver screen.
Talking about the rest of the film, Eric, this is where the part where I will start to criticize it. The score is awful.
Yeah, not great.
I hate the music to this movie. It's and Eric, one of the reasons this is a wonderful coincidence. It was composed by a gentleman named Leonard Rosenman, who you may recognize his name, Eric. He did the score to the animated Lord of the Rings.
Fucking hate that guy. Hey, I hate him. I hate him so much. So you tell me you've been trying to convince me
No,
that this
it was a
movie is a better
wonderful
movie.
coincidence.
No. You've been trying to convince me that this movie is a better movie than that is, and then you lay that on me. You lay that information on me.
It's so funny how this worked out, because I've seen this movie so many times that I didn't know who wrote the music, but I never liked the music. Preparing for this episode, I was actually like really analyzing it, and I'm like, man, this music is so corny. It's so bad. And I looked it up. I'm like, Leonard Rosenman. I was like, I recognize that name. And then I saw the Lord of the Rings on his resume. I'm like, oh my gosh. Anton, this got nominated for Best Original Score, but neither of James Horner's 2 contributions were nominated.
It's a crime. But do you think that he became friends with Nimoy after Nimoy recorded The Tale of Bilbo Baggins?
It's a good question.
It's an interesting connection, right?
Yeah. Do you think maybe Nimoy was just like, I heard your work on Lord of the Rings. It was brilliant. I want you to do Star Trek. Oh, and by the way, during some of the action sequences, can you use the lamest sounding trumpets that you can come up with? Because when they're getting Chekhov out of the hospital, it's like, it's awful.
My God, you're so right.
That was very dated, and it felt out of place for the 80s.
It sort of added to that jokey aspect of it that I'm not a huge fan of.
I'm with you on that, Eric. It's just even like, my wife does not analyze movies at all like the way I do. She's like, what's going on with the music here? I'm like, I don't know.
It's not good.
But on a bit of trivia, I thought both of you would appreciate this. 9 Inch Nails sampled the Alien Whale song for their track Get Down, Make Love. Thought that was kind of cool.
Love that.
Yeah, we all like 9 Inch Nails, right?
Who doesn't love Trent Reznor?
I like 9 Inch Nails. I just don't like that they're doing the next Tron movie.
I don't. I have a lot of. I've been impressed with what Trent Reznor's done
for movies. Yeah,
yeah.
Not for movies, but like he does very like industrial stuff, right? I mean, I think that's literally the name of a genre.
Yes.
I don't see that fitting in with Tron. And I get that maybe trying to do something different, whatever. But like Tron is like 80s synths, and that doesn't mean cheesy, because we know that it can be done without being cheesy or corny. It can still be epic.
Eric, we're not getting Daft Punk.
I know that. I'm just saying.
So it's so depressing what Disney did to ruin the relationship.
It's so depressing what Disney does, period.
Sometimes
we could just leave it at that.
They made Tron though. Like Disney gave us that
talking
movie. Both of those movies.
Modern Disney, current Disney.
Are you including Pixar in that?
No, Just Disney.
They own Pixar.
I'm aware, but Pixar is still attempting to come out with original content. Disney is like,
You're right. You're not wrong.
let's do a prequel for
let's
one of
do
the
Simba.
parents we killed. Great. Who gives a fuck? I sure don't.
You're not wrong. Well, I wrote that down in the notes. Like, if Disney had done Star Trek, The Probe would have gotten its own streaming series, its own zip code, its own
If
family tree.
Disney had done Star Trek, by this point we would have probably already gotten the Star Trek babies,
Probably.
a la Muppet babies.
Anton, did you
Yeah,
recognize VJ from Octopussy?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, he's in this.
Yeah, it's so
He
fun.
is in this. What do we think of the effects?
I was impressed.
This movie contains one of my all-time favorite shots in any Star Trek film. When the bird of prey decloaks, hovering over the whaling ship, and you get the shadow on the ocean. It's one of my favorite shots. Eric has no comment.
If you don't have anything nice to say,
You come on, Eric. You like the effects here.
the effects are okay. The effects are good. This is a fucking sci-fi movie. Like what you just said. Like, oh, it's uncloaking over a whaling ship. No, I want it uncloaking over like a fucking supernova or something.
Well, you
Then
need
I'd
to
be
see the
happy
motion
with the
picture
effects.
because you're going to get
Fine.
a bunch of that.
Then I'll watch the motion picture. Doesn't
Okay.
change this movie.
You're right. All right. I don't think we have anything else to talk about at this point.
No,
I thought it was a
Thank you.
pretty good conversation though.
I thought so. There's a
You
lot of
named it a bit.
slander going on here.
Oh, okay.
Some slander. I'm upset you don't like this movie, Eric. I thought you would.
We can talk.
I'm fine. I'm fine with it, Eric.
I
You
know.
feel however you want to feel.
Everybody's entitled to their
I
opinion.
know. I feel guilty because you're like you told me this was a trilogy and
Yeah, well, it's how you presented it to me.
well, I didn't lie.
I'm not saying it's your fault. I'm just saying it's because of you. I'm kidding.
All right.
But
Well,
I'm just trying to make you feel bad.
you know, then
It's
I'm
fine.
gonna make you go first and give your rating.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, because I'm glad you told me to watch all three of them, because then I wouldn't have watched Wrath of Khan. But because I watched Wrath of Khan, I don't think this holds a candle to it. I just really don't. I've said it throughout this, throughout our discussion. This would have been great if it was detached from all that, because I did feel, and it's not even just a feeling, and it's not what you said to me, Pat. They intended this as a trilogy. Otherwise, why would they tie it in? I think they probably should have saved this idea for a standalone movie, and I probably would have liked it more. My other problem is that I've seen this kind of story done in The Next Generation in a way that I liked a whole lot more. I think, and I'm sure people will disagree with me. I think it's cheap for you to say, we'll do a sci-fi movie that takes place in the future, but we're just going to go back in time and shoot it as though it's present day, i.e. 1987. If I had seen the first two movies in theaters and I was excited about this and going to see it, and I don't know what the marketing was like, but I would have been disappointed. I like the humor, I like the acting, but when you couple it with the two movies that came before it, and you're not wrong, Pat. I mean, like, Search for Spock isn't fantastic, but at least it held on to those, I don't know, the core feeling that was in Wrath of Khan. And when you look at these movies as a whole, they sort of got sillier as they went on. And I'm okay with that, but I just felt like between Wrath of Khan and this, it was such a change in tone. It was almost like whiplash. And like I said, if you're doing a trilogy, and then, Wrath of Khan is serious, Search for Spock is serious. I mean, his son dies, it's still a serious movie. And then you're like, here's a comedy. It's tonal whiplash, and I didn't enjoy it, especially because I sat down and I watched them one after another. I didn't wait between days. I just watched them as a block, and I thought this was the weakest one. I don't think it's a terrible movie. It's just, if somebody came up to me and said, hey, what Star Trek movie should I watch? It's going to be Wrath of Khan. I'm going to give this a C+. I don't think it's any higher than that. I was wavering around giving it like a C minus, but I feel like that's too harsh. Like C to C plus for me. It's not getting higher than that from me. And again, it's not that I thought it was a bad movie. It's not that I didn't like it. It's just when you look at it in the context of the previous two films, and it's standing up against Wrath of Khan, which, like I said earlier, that's an A plus. I love that movie. I will rewatch that movie. It will go into my rotation of movies that I watch. I just don't think it holds a candle to him, and it feels sort of jokey. And that's fine if you want to do that, but just don't tie it to such a serious previous two movies.
That's fair. And wow, you gave a higher rating than I thought you were going to.
I'm not that tough on my grading. Like, again, I did not dislike it. I disliked it as part of this series, if that makes sense.
No, it does.
I would have liked it a lot more.
You're totally fair.
If they started it and they were like, so for the movie after The Search for Spock, they sort of continue a story, do something with the Klingons, whatever. And then for the next movie, we got to go back to Earth for some reason. And then this all happens. I probably would have liked it a lot more.
It's one of the best Trek films. It's one of my favorite sci-fi films from the 80s. I love the humor. I love the tone. Eric, I think you are correct that it is a shift from what came before it. I like the shift, though, because that's what I want from a sequel. And I admit it's not for everyone. It's like comfort food to me. That's what this movie is. This is like, if you're going through Disney World, this is the Magic Kingdom for Star Trek. I enjoy it. Unfortunately, Anton, Paramount got the wrong idea from this film, and they doubled down on the comedy for the next film, Final Frontier. And if anyone doesn't like this film less than Eric, well, then double dumbass on them. It has to be respected. This film does for a very important reason. We sort of hinted at this in the production history. This is directly responsible for the continuation of Star Trek as a franchise. And I'm not talking about the films. It did so well at the box office that Gene Roddenberry was able to convince Paramount to give Trek another chance at television. This is why we got The Next Generation, this film. Now, while they would have kept making films after this, without this one, The Next Generation, although it technically started before all of us were born, I'm talking about the three of us, that is pretty much the series that introduced Trek to our generation, right? Because it was on TV, just reruns a lot, and that doesn't happen without this film. So whether you like this film or not, it has to be respected just for that. I like this film quite a bit. I rate it at a B+.
This film is an amazing example of a sequel that is deviating from its predecessors and not afraid to take a lot of artistic leaps. Leonard Nimoy directing was an awesome decision by the studio to support, and being a big fan of the series, I'm of the same opinion of Pat, and just how much I appreciate a film like this, how comforting the film feels, and I think a lot of that for me is just how grounded this film feels. It is a fish out of water story with a science fiction sizzle, but at the same time, it's set in San Francisco in the 80s, and it's just very satisfying in that sense. It almost feels like slice of life sci-fi, and that is very entertaining for me. That's also just very satisfying to see on screen, and seeing it as a nice bow to the series that we first started with Wrath of Khan, and again, a reset of the series. So that's such a fun film for me, one that I truly, truly enjoy. Just quick sidebar, 1986 was a great year for film. Paramount was going strong. Top Gun was the top movie of the year. And this, of course, made a ton of money at the box office. And I just wanted to mention that, and just that it's great to see films from that heyday, and also having been recently at Paramount Studios, being able to see the films that really are part of that Mount Rushmore of what makes movies great today. A movie that wasn't great in 1986 was Hamburger, the motion picture. If you've never heard of it, it is a film about the main character going to enroll in Hamburger University because he wants to open his own Buster Burger fast food franchise. It stars Dick Butkus, and it's a terrible film. If you're wondering why I'm ending with this on my film grading, it's because I just want to keep things a bit grounded. I give Star Trek: The Voyage Home a B+.
I was wondering where you were going with that. Yes, yes. I still am, but
It's a real movie.
I believe you.
It's
What
terrible.
Else did we get in '86? We got Aliens,
Aliens.
Little Shop of Horrors, Platoon.
Wait, did a Miyazaki film come out in '86? My
Oh.
wife and I just recently realized that Miyazaki films have a very calming effect on my daughter.
That would have been
good.
early Miyazaki, right, Anton?
Early. Kiki's Delivery Service was 1988, right? No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It might have been Porco Rosso, actually.
Castle in the Sky.
Castle in the Sky. Okay.
This is 1986.
Early Miyazaki. Yeah.
Early Miyazaki. But also, Pat, I just want to specify, I did not say it was a shift. I said it was whiplash.
Yes, there you go.
Patrick wants to have whiplash.
Sorry,
No.
My Neighbor Totoro was 1988, so literally right there.
Right.
Well, that's it for Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home. Eric, your rating was a lot kinder than I thought it was going to be. I have to say.
I typically am, and I mean, listen, because I also focus on the fact that people worked really hard on this, and I appreciate, because I didn't know going into this, Leonard Nimoy's goals. I like Leonard Nimoy. I'm sure that everyone worked really hard. The acting is good. The comedy is good. I just didn't.
You were
like
fair.
It as
I mean, you made good points.
Yeah, I'm not gonna give it an F. It's no Lord of the Rings the animated movie.
It's no Blade Trinity.
It's no Blade Trinity. Yeah, come on. I'm aware of that.
Well, Anton, I think next week is Batman versus Superman: Dawn of Justice
with our good friend Ivan.
Yes.
Spoiler alert. He worked on it.
He worked on the film.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's it for this week's edition of Why Wasn't It Better? If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please give us a follow and a 5-star review. Be sure to check out our YouTube channel as well. As always, you can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. If anyone would like to support us directly, we have a Patreon and YouTube subscription levels. Links are in the description. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.